Good afternoon,
Very good. He's
and
very
welcome
bright,
to
but
the
it's
Voice of Wisdom.
too agreeable. I mean,
With
too
over
calm.
60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the State of the Union is Yoni Cohen. Yoni is a current third-year medical student interested in contributing to public health policy and education in the future. He has a degree in biology from Yeshiva University and has conducted medical research at various institutions, including Yale Medical School and Mount Sinai. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Cohen.
Welcome back. I salute you, my precious audience. I love you guys. Yeah, the comments you send me are terrific, and keep on sending them. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's. I hope it's a debate. Sometimes it turns out to be too calm, but I think we have a guest here who's brilliant, who's charming, and promises to beat me up. And I hope I don't beat him up too badly. So without further ado, we're going to discuss, as the note we sent out today, earlier today, Biden's State of the Union speech. I thought it was excellent. Nothing is perfect. Human beings are imperfect. But it was really, I thought, way above his usual ability to even speak. He didn't make any major errors. He didn't stumble last night. And I thought some of the ideas he proposed and some of the issues he raised were fantastic. So I don't know how my guest feels, but he promised to disagree with me, and I'm sure he will. And a lot of people do and should, and as a consequence, I learn. If somebody agrees with me, I don't learn anything. So I'm looking forward to learning as Yoni speaks his mind and his views of Biden and the Democrats and the Republicans and the state of our nation. So this is our version of the state of our nation. So Yoni, do you want to say some introductory remarks, and then we can launch into our differences?
Sure. So first of all, it's a huge pleasure and honor to be here on the show with you. And as a consistent listener to your show, it's really an honor to be in the hot seat over here. And I'm looking forward to an interesting evening of discussion and debate. So I did also watch the State of the Union, and it actually struck me that how wonderful modern medicine is at being able to transform Biden, who we know is severely deficient in many different areas, into a walking and talking and functioning president. So that's really an applause to modern medicine.
That's one of the nicest things some of the Republicans ever say about.
The second thing I would say is the reason why many people reacted so positively to his speech is because a lot of the
low expectations
is one of them, but a lot of the policies he's presented are simply continuing or rehashing many of Trump's policies. Many of the Make America Great Again policies, such as domestic manufacturing, increasing jobs in America, challenging global adversaries. So it's very interesting to me to see how people reacted positively to when President Biden said things that President Trump got so derided for and completely ignored on for saying the same things a few years earlier. A second point I would raise is many of the positive remarks he made on the economy about how we've bounced back in many different areas, such as gas prices, such as job growth, such as inflation, such as the unemployment rate. We're simply returning, as far as unemployment rate, I have a chart here in front of me, we're simply returning to pre-COVID levels. So celebrating that, celebrating a recovery of unemployment that should have happened far sooner, in my opinion, is nothing really to celebrate at.
What do you mean? We're at 3.4%, the lowest in 50 years.
So
we weren't at that level.
Yeah, it was
prior.
just to make the point that it was 3.5% before Corona hit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we have a chart over here. It was 3.4. Now we're at 3.5. It is a difference. I concede that to you that yes, the unemployment rate is lowest as you noted.
And I think during his talk yesterday, he said he created in this last year 12 million jobs, the most ever of any president, including even the ones that served 4 years. So that's not inconsequential, and regardless of when he did it,
Yeah.
for sure there was a big bounce back after COVID, and he doesn't get all the credit for it. But
I think it's unfair to assign him blame, but it's also unfair to give him credit, because if you're restoring jobs, then you're not really creating jobs, you're merely restoring. So there's a difference between creating jobs and restoring jobs. If I put you out of work and I say you have to stay home, and then I let you come back to your job, I'm not really creating a new job, I'm merely restoring it.
well, it's hard to. You can't tell me what part was the jobs restored and what kind of new jobs were created, because there certainly were a lot of new jobs created in the last year.
That's a good point also. However, the jobs that he says he would create, many of them haven't actually been filled. He said he would create 800,000 new manufacturing jobs.
No, those are he said that's what he's promising to do in the future.
Yeah, and yet in a different part of the State of the Union, he said he already created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. So it's kind of unclear. And again, I'm not assigning blame to him because he's not very careful in his words. So it's unfair to assign blame to him. However, it's the administration that gave him his talking points that I have a big problem with. And we can go into that, how many of the administration are totally incompetent when it comes to dealing with our affairs. And we can go into that as well.
Oh, maybe you have some inside information. Which of members of his administration are having affairs? That would be,
Oh no, I meant
that would be the most.
Yeah, I meant
that would be the most interesting
well, you know,
part of
there
it.
was the kiss between the first lady and the second man. That got a lot of attention. I don't know if we want to go into that or not.
Well,
It's a shame that that was the most highlighted point of the evening, when I think a lot of other issues should have been raised about
in
the
your
speech.
mind, that was the most highlighted.
You know what? Not in my
I
mind.
thought
I
I
came
thought
prepared.
that was the most
I thought that was-
inconsequential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for the kids my age, it's, I guess, the most exciting thing that happened. For me, as someone who studies this and is studying the state of our country, I think it's a shame that that's stealing the attention when there's a lot more important issues to talk about.
You know, the point that you made about bringing jobs back, it's interesting. I don't think that's a major issue. In a sense, Trump introduced tariffs against China and other countries, but primarily against China. And that's one of the things. I wrote a book before the pandemic. I never published it. But I said, you know, that's one of the worst things you could do, because the basis of capitalism, and we've been the biggest beneficiary the last 30 or 40 years while China has been growing. The United States has been doing well. We've both benefited from each other's behavior. But what Adam Smith, defined capitalism is each man is motivated to produce more at the lowest price, because before that, people were primarily farmers, and I think even in the United States in the 1800s, 92% of the employees were not employees; they could have owned the farm too. Employed on farms, 92% of the total employees in the States were. Now, I think it's about 3%, and they produce more than enough for the United States and a lot for the rest of the world. So China if he's successful in cutting off China totally, they didn't react that badly. They could have, but if they discouraged all trade with China, and I'm cognizant that they steal a lot of technology. We steal some of their technology. One of the things I told my employees years ago about the advantage of the internet, because I once took a company public that did scientific publications of PhDs, and they got it was very, very small, audience that would buy it. Maybe the Library of Congress bought a copy, but few specialists bought it, and they charged something like $10,000 for the cheapest one, and as much as $25,000 to $50,000 or more for some of the ones that there was more demand for. And I said, the tragedy was that some guy at PhD would be doing a PhD in Harvard, and somebody would be doing it at Stanford, and somebody would be doing it in Russia, and somebody would be doing it in China, and different places throughout the world. And they were doing the same exact work. Not exact, but essentially, overwhelmingly the same work. Only because they weren't aware. Today, we move faster because everybody is instantly aware of everybody's PhDs that's been published, that's out there. And that guy's business has declined significantly because I don't think he could get anywhere near what he used to get.
So do you think China is in competition with us? Do you think Biden should have been easier
No,
on them?
I think China represents in their relation with us exactly what capitalism benefits from. In other words, China produces at a very low price, and if China were cut off, you'd have to close down Walmart and Target and Home Depot and dollar stores, and because 95% of the products there, and the American, the lowest, the most needy Americans, the lowest class Americans, and the middle class even, are enormous beneficiaries of that. And to say, and I'll tell you something interesting I wrote in my book, and which is still true. Years ago, we used to wait eagerly and anxiously to find out what the balance of trade was. And if it came out bad, the market started to sell off sharply. It wasn't a fraction of what it's been in recent years, when nobody cares about the announcement, and it balanced out. In those days, years ago, we were concerned about Japan, because Japan had an overwhelming balance of payments with the United States. But what did they do with the money? They bought American bonds, which helped us. They bought Rockefeller Center. They bought, what's that golf course on the West Coast? Pebble Beach. They bought a lot of American assets.
So it sounds like there's a difference.
No, but I have to tell you the punchline. 15 years later, not exactly sure the time span, they sold back the Rockefeller Center back to the Rockefellers or some other group at a fraction of what they paid. They sold Pebble Beach back at a fraction of what they paid. It didn't hurt us. It funded America. They invested a lot of money in America. So the money straightens out. But Trump was a genius in this sense. He made major issues out of issues that exist and are somewhat relevant, but ones that people could identify with. And when he says, losing all these jobs to China and this, that was our negligence, that we didn't identify that we needed to make more chips. At one time we made, 80% of the chips in the world. Now we're making 10%. And we did when the COVID started, we didn't have medical equipment.
So I think in one area we will both agree with that critical supplies that are necessary for our defense, for our health, need to be sourced in America and made in America.
Absolutely.
And that's something that President Biden brought up at the speech, but it's basically repeating the same thing as Donald Trump said. And basically something that's been argued by the right for many decades since.
But the right was in power for 8 years, and they did nothing about it. Bush Jr. was...
So that's actually leading to me the next part of my speech.
Bush was 8 years.
Yeah, he was. So because he was in there for 8 years, and the fact that America didn't learn after 4 years of his failure, it actually highlights a big failure of Republicans in general to govern effectively and to listen to their base and to actually do what's best for America and not what's best for the party. So I think I always call, and I've heard it said before, that the Republicans are the stupid party. I won't say what the Democrats are because I don't want this live to be taken down from YouTube. But a lot of the approval for Biden's speech came from Republicans who pretend to pander to their base during election time, and then when they get into office, they're happy to work with Biden on whatever he wishes. So I think that's a big issue I had with the Republicans in general. But as related to Biden's speech, I thought, again, some parts were good, some parts were complete lies, some parts were creating illusions that were somehow succeeding in many different areas, whether it's economy, whether it's foreign policy, and really we don't have a plan in many of these areas. We're simply restoring ourselves to what we were pre-COVID, and when it comes to foreign policy, we really don't have a clue, and I think you would agree with that as well.
No, I don't agree with that.
Do you think we are being extra belligerent in many different areas? So then you would agree with me.
Absolutely.
You agree with me, then?
Really?
Yeah.
Because of the two parties, the Republicans have always been more hawkish than the Democrats.
Until recently. Now suddenly that Biden is in power, the Democrats are happy to go along with. I think that's a big problem.
I was going to call Biden and tell him before he helped Ukraine respond militarily to the Russian. The Russians started it, but they didn't start it till they. I don't know if you heard or you listened that much, but Putin said, "Don't let Ukraine join NATO, and I won't start the war." Mm-hmm. And so, I don't trust Putin. But before you start a war, it's worth a shot, and you tell Putin, "We're not going to let him because we don't need Ukraine in NATO. It's got 20 countries. It's NATO. Ukraine wants to be in NATO because the minute you sign into NATO, you become guaranteed that America, if a war starts, America will join immediately on your side." I don't know what a great thing that is, because there's 20 countries out there that could get involved, and
Sure. So I don't want to make I don't want to make today's show just about Ukraine, but I would just note that you can't join NATO if you have an active conflict going on your borders. So Ukraine would have never been part of NATO to begin with. That's just in the bylaws. The other part I would say is I have nothing personally.
They could have let.
So it would have to be a unanimous vote by all members.
It's always got to be. It's always got to be.
But aside from that, you can't have an active conflict if you wish to join NATO, because then you're effectively drafting NATO. They tried it in the Donbass. Sure, Donetsk and Luhansk.
That wasn't an active conflict.
Sure, it's
It wasn't going on.
It was recognized by NATO, by the UN, by many others as an active conflict. So again, I don't want to get too much into.
No, that's all right. I like you taking strong position. Don't back down.
But me personally, I don't have a problem with Ukraine.
No, but why not try initially diplomacy?
I agree with you.
And you tell them, if you launch, then America's going to be your active adversary militarily.
I agree with you that the Biden administration has its hands in Ukraine for a long time, and a lot of the leftovers from the Obama administration came back to join Biden's administration in the State Department, and they're actively meddling to do whatever they can to destabilize Russia in any way.
Trump didn't do anything different than his predecessor on that score, and and
I'm not
the
saying.
Republicans-
Yeah, I'm not
No,
saying
I'm
Trump
saying
did it or didn't.
It's
It's a
they
shame.
were-
It's a shame what goes on in the State Department. That we could agree
we
with.
could give credit to both parties for yeah. But think of it this way: people don't understand. First of all, I wanted to tell them it could lead us into a world war, and it could lead us, God forbid, into a nuclear war. You don't, when you corner a guy, or till this day, if you corner him and he got no choice, he might use it. So, and when you think of a nuclear war today, it's not like when I was young, when we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was very, very costly and very cruel, and killed, mostly citizens and not military people. But a lot of people said we shouldn't have done it. I thought we should do it because we would have lost many thousands of more of our people. In general, I would like to outlaw all wars, because
If only that were possible. One day.
well, it's possible if we, they outlawed what is it when the mines when they leave it at the end of the war.
Minefields.
What is it
Cluster
called?
munitions, maybe?
Landmines.
Landmines. Mm-hmm. They outlawed that because it's outrageous. The war ends and people are still getting killed because the little kids or whoever's in the field steps on it and getting killed. They outlawed poison in wars.
Chemical weapons, yes.
It's violated, but nothing is perfect with human beings, but at least you have some reason to fight it more strongly.
I agree with you. We should always seek peace before war.
We've outlawed the biological thing. So we could outlaw wars if we vote on it and collectively put together a not the UN, because we thought the UN would be an answer, but it has no military, and we'd never get a vote to employ the troops, because look, you don't need more than the Human Rights Commission, which overwhelmingly from year to year.
Don't get me started on the UN.
Has Iran as the head of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we see eye to eye.
The most terrorizing criminal countries in the world. And what do they do? 90% of the time, the UN and those commissions are attacking Israel, And Israel, incidentally, is the first country in the world that any country that has a major negative event, they're in Turkey.
They are, yeah.
Now. And when they had the monsoons, everywhere they put their members of the IDF and volunteers, but nevertheless, they're always brought up that they want to bring them up before the International Criminal Court. Yeah. So I got off track.
No, we're saying wars can or cannot be.
When I get
outlawed.
to Israel, no. So I'm saying.
Yeah.
Let me tell you why I feel that wars should be outlawed. First of all, laws traditionally were started because old generals who don't run up to the front, they send the young troops up. So the young troops get killed and slaughtered and maimed and so forth. So all the women are left for the old generals that can't get any while the young guys are around. That's a backward theory, but to take your most precious, for example, in Afghanistan or in Iraq, we lost so many of our most precious. You know what?
We lost our best.
I'd be in favor of this. As a matter of fact, I wanted to do a movie of this, that nobody could get drafted or fight in a war, and they could pass this law, unless they're 65 or over. Because I know once you're over 65, even if you have the inclination to run after them, you'd rather sit down and take a nap or have a meal. You're not going to go with such a vengeance. And even if you want to, physically you can't.
This is exactly why.
But more important, if they get wounded or killed, and the wife gets a Purple Heart or a gold what is
Gold
it?
Star.
Gold Star.
Yeah.
They'll be so proud. My husband, when you lose a kid, they're brokenhearted. But when he's over 65 or 70 or 75 or 80, 85, they'll be so proud. And so, and it's not a major loss. They lived most of the, remember, up to the beginning of the last century, the lifespan was about 42. So people didn't even have time to get divorced. They didn't have time to get, it was, they didn't even have time to get cancer because cancer is another word.
This is exactly why I throw blame equally to Republicans, to Democrats, to the Bushes, to anyone, to the Bidens, to anyone who seeks to
you're right.
take our youth and mess them over and
But
take our country and
it's
plunder
not
the
only,
wealth.
it's not only our youth. If it weren't for our generals and our leaders sending our youth, young women and young men, and it's not only killed, because maimed is, and crippled is worse than, because we just, maybe 3 years ago, took the last Army veteran from the Second World War, and who passed away at one of these veterans' hospitals that you never hear from. It's quiet, but they're suffering for the last, how many years? Since 1945 was the end of the war, 55 and maybe another 17, so 65, 72 years. We're paying, it's the cash that we pay. It's not what we already spent in the wars, the amount of treasure and blood that we, so, what was it? No, so I'm saying, the people on the other side that we're trying to make more weapons, assault weapons that can kill 1,000, you shoot 1,000 bullets.
So are you talking about rifles, just to be clear? Are we talking about Second Amendment?
Second Amendment.
So this is something that Biden also brought up in the State of the
He's
Union.
right.
He wanted to ban all semi-automatic
I
rifles.
agree with him more.
So do you think any kind of guns should be allowed? Can I own a gun?
I think every kind of gun should be allowed.
So why can't, okay,
But
allowed.
wait a second. Australia had one event like this in 1995. One mass slaughter. They brought in all the guns. They outlawed guns totally, and now you can get a gun, but it takes you a year, not 3 days to get a what do you call it? You do it through the police department. At the end of a year, they know that you're competent to handle a gun, to put it away safely, because we lose so many people, kids. Even policemen that leave their gun around, they don't realize.
So I have to push back on that because, first of all, Australia recently had a mass shooting.
That's the first time.
No, recently.
I said the first time since 95.
Second of all, they do have.
We have one every day.
Second, we
have more than one a day.
That's a problem of the kind of youth we're raising in this country. That is the big problem, and I think that's a lot.
Every country has problem with youth.
I think we lead the world in this area.
That's bullshit. That's mental thing. We have more mental problems.
No, I'm not talking about mentally. I'm not talking about mentally. I'm saying the upbringing and the parental responsibility. Like you mentioned, police officers leaving their gun outside.
But if they didn't have the availability, the easy access.
We all have knives in our kitchens.
You ever try to kill 30 people with a knife?
Many people were killed in China by a knife. There was, I believe, 19 were killed with a knife. I'm happy to send you the link.
No, I'm saying it could happen. It's a miracle that one guy. But also, with a knife, if somebody's alert, they could stop the guy with a gun. You run towards him, he'll kill you.
So another thing is, in Australia, we saw, and this goes to the basic.
Also, recently, New Zealand had a mass slaughter. They did exactly what Australia.
You're only strengthening my point because during coronavirus, Australia and New Zealand promoted some of the most tyrannical policies known to human beings.
Like what?
Like locking people up in their homes, not letting them go out. People who protested in the streets were dragged away, sent into kind of basically mirroring what China did. Yeah, and I know that part of the world is a little cuckoo when it comes to this, but
you're making a judgment. It was trying to protect the people against
I try to protect. Just because I want to protect someone doesn't mean I have the right to hurt them and tell them it's for your benefit. I'm hurting you. I'm putting you in a detention camp for your benefit.
What do you mean?
I'm putting
what do you mean? We draft people to get killed, but it's for the good of the masses. It's the good of all the people. We shouldn't have complete freedom. We should have freedom as long as it doesn't hurt other people. It doesn't So I don't agree with that. I agree that if we find they found that if they let their people run around, they're going to lose a lot of people. You may not agree with that. I may not agree with that. But it was a thing like during the war. You draft people against their will. You think mothers and fathers were so happy to have their kids go to, and that was a justified war?
Of course not. But I think to bring a comparison from war to a virus with a 99% survival rate is very false.
A virus, but a virus could be worse than a war.
In this case, it wasn't, and we knew that early on. So I think it's also...
In 1918, we lost more people in that
Spanish
pandemic than we lost in all the wars except this, other than the Civil War.
Spanish flu,
and
yes.
every year from guns, we lose more people than we lost in all the wars since the Civil War.
So
and also all the suicides.
How many suicides do we have a year?
I forgot.
30,000.
Yeah.
How many homicides do we have a year? Around 10,000. Where do most of these homicides occur? In inner cities. Brooklyn, yeah, unfortunately. In inner cities that are ruled by Democratic prosecutors. President Biden in the State of the Union mentioned a lot of huffing and puffing about crime and safety. He never addressed the root causes that drive crime. He never addressed the root causes that explain why people who are recidivists, they keep committing crimes, they're let out early. We see that in Brooklyn a lot, where someone will punch a Jew, they're put in jail, the next day they're let out. So a lot of the drivers on crime, a lot of the illegal guns, which I think we should be focusing on more and more instead of the legal. People who bought their guns legally, they're responsible for it, they shouldn't be touched at all. They should be respected.
There's no such thing as legal. Do you know that even with the what do they call it? Checking them out. What do they call it?
NICS. It's the National Instant Criminal
No,
Background
what
Check
do they
System.
call that?
Background checks?
Background checks.
NICS, yeah.
Background
The
checks.
FBI runs the background check.
Even with the background checks, you could get all the guns you want without a background check.
It's legally.
Legally.
Illegally.
Legally.
How so?
Every weekend for sure, but every week there are many gun shows.
So this is
And at gun shows, you could buy 30 guns and distribute them to everybody.
So I'm happy to push back on this because I'm pretty experienced in researching gun law. I think it's very important as it intersects with medicine to truly understand what it is.
Tell me why, if it's in the Constitution and that you're allowed to own a gun, why the Congress, they were very good with language, just as like we are with Torah. There's no extra words, why didn't they say every man, every woman, man or woman, in those days they didn't consider women or blacks normal, but every American is entitled to have a gun.
They did. They said
didn't.
the militia. The militia is every
They
man.
said, no.
Yes.
They said a well-armed militia.
A well-regulated militia necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Only within the only within the militia.
But who's the militia? The militia is
The
you,
militia
me, him, everyone.
What do you mean? I'm not in the militia.
I think you gracefully aged out of the militia.
No,
your grandkids, your sons, yes.
My kids are.
Yes, they're of age. They're of age.
None of them
If
are.
Yes.
They're not in the militia now. Don't tell me they're in the militia. So when they get into the militia, they definitely should have a gun. In Israel, everybody has a gun because they're all in the army. That's necessary. But why did they add that extra language? You know why? Because we overthrew the British with guns. What kind of guns? Muskets.
The same ones that the British were using against the Americans.
But muskets,
so both sides had muskets.
But muskets that shoot one bullet, it takes you 2 minutes to reload. They didn't have assault weapons.
So what's an assault weapon?
Assault weapons, you could buy.
An assault weapon?
You could buy a magazine that has 100
rounds, 100 rounds.
And those 100 rounds you can launch within 3 minutes.
Okay, so do you think they didn't have this technology 100 years? Did they have this technology 100 years ago?
They didn't have it during the Revolutionary War, no.
Not the Revolutionary War, but 100 years ago they did.
During the Revolution. No, but when was the Constitution written?
In 1776.
So at that time they didn't have it. So they said within the,
So I still have to push back.
And the NRA is the one that
I still have to push back because if you read the Federalist Papers, you see very clearly that the framers of the Constitution were in favor, and this is from Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, many others, they were fully in favor of the citizen being well-versed with his or her rifle, and they also were very well-versed with the modern firearm technologies of the day.
But they had no clue.
And they were
They had no clue of what was going to ensue.
But firearms technology advanced from the musket was not the first firearm.
There was
First,
no. There was
musket
no,
was an evolution
there
in
was
firearms.
there was no mass killing guns in those days.
Well, what do you define as?
You know, if you look at the old cowboy movie, yes, anybody could call them, yes.
And I think President Biden, he keeps mentioning that he wants to ban assault rifles, whatever that
Absolutely.
means. And then he says he
we
doesn't talk about prosecutors.
We banned it for 10 years.
And nothing changed. Look at the statistics. There was no drop in mass shootings
There
at
was-
all.
there
I
was
can show you the
absolutely-
statistics.
there was
Nothing changed.
absolutely a
Columbine happened.
reduction.
Columbine happened. The tragedy at Columbine happened during the
There was a
so-called assault weapons
reduction. There was
ban.
a definite reduction in the amount of
If
deaths.
the whole premise of the
incidentally, let me
ban,
tell you something. Suicide, other than guns, 90% of the suicides fail. Did you know that?
I didn't know. That's a big problem in general because people who are feeling suicidal to that point, there needs to be some kind of help that they can access.
Why give them access to guns?
But
They shouldn't be so readily available. That's not necessary. You know, to make it for hunters, yeah, for hunters. So the NRA gets all the hunters to line up. In Judaism, you're not allowed even to hunt because, you know, it's
Sure, cruelty to
and
animals.
unusual.
Yeah, sure.
You could shoot it and wound it, and it could be running around for who knows how long wounded. It's ruthless. Trump Jr. says he does it all the time. It's his favorite sport. You know. Okay, look. So that's something that the world has. I don't think it's right. But I started to say, in a war, we send our young people, the other country sends our young people, you're shooting the guy on the other side that you might be best friends, that you might
I 100%
love.
agree with you.
You might love if you get to know
If
him.
there was no war, you would be friends with them.
Yeah, so
You could drink over a beer and have be friends. Yeah.
So my thing is, over 65, we could allow the world to, if they want to insist on wars. Because no, really, it's not a joke.
I think your point should be sent to members of Congress.
No.
They should be,
I want to make a movie out of it to show
what it would look like.
What happened with a 65-year-old.
Yeah. The best way to
65 is the starting age.
Yeah.
70, 75.
The best way to prevent war is to be strong and to use diplomacy.
That's bullshit. We're the strongest. We're in the most wars. We are the strongest.
So that's why I said to use diplomacy. Your diplomacy is you should use diplomacy, but your diplomacy is only respected if you're strong.
Think of it this way: we're the strongest nation in the world with the strongest arms. In fact, there couldn't be wars throughout the world if we didn't supply. That's our major export. It's ridiculous.
Sure, I agree with you here. So.
And what the hell was I talking
no,
about?
I 100% agree with you. I actually think that the Second Amendment gives citizens the right to resist tyranny, which could be foreign invasion. We see how in Ukraine, citizens are defending themselves from Russian invasion. So it just shows you many of these citizens, they regret not being able to train with firearms beforehand.
Let me advise you or inform you or enlighten you that this is the strongest country in the world with the biggest armaments, with defense spending. They call it defense spending. When I was young, during the Second World War and still after it, it was called the War Department. They figured that's not a good thing, you know. They needed a euphemism. You know, you don't say, "I'm sorry to tell you, your father dropped dead," or you use euphemism. So they figured defense, but they didn't make a defense and an offense department. They made it's all called defense, right? And so how could you vote against defense? So Congress never votes against defense. If you know your history, Eisenhower was the best general
World War II.
Not a general. He was the best general in the history of the United States. Because
I happen to like Patton, but MacArthur was quite good as well.
Patton's popular because he was.
Schwarzkopf was also pretty good in the 90s.
Not compared to
Eisenhower was the great, of course.
Eisenhower was a strategist. Is that the way you pronounce it? A strategist. Patton was striking. You know, he was mean. He was tough, and Schwarzkopf was nowhere near either one of them. But Eisenhower was a leading general of all time, and he knew the most about the military. I used to think he was the worst president because
he actually warned the Americans about the defense military-industrial complex.
When I lived through it, I used to think, and after he even served, I thought he was the worst president ever, because nothing happened during his 8 years. You can't be a great president unless you're there during a war, and like Roosevelt, like Truman, like whoever, like Lincoln. If there's no war, you can't be a great president. It's some major event. So he was there for 8 years, nothing happened. They even used to joke, somebody said, one guy proved, you don't need a president for this, you don't need a president for that. And they said, Eisenhower proved you don't even need a president. But he was the one that at the end of his administration, usually after 8 years, the president gets up and says all the good things he did, how he improved the world and this and that. His strongest warning and his major speech at the end of his thing, he warned against the military-industrial complex. And it's so powerful, you know why? Because defense you can't vote against. So Congress and senators, how could you vote against defense, right? The second thing is, it's so powerful because every state, all 50 states and all 50 congressmen and senators have defense contractors that get enormous, the most profitable manufacturing is in defense because they don't even know what they have, that they haven't been able to do an audit. I don't know if you're familiar with that, for years of the military, because they just spend it.
The Pentagon's, it's out of control.
And they want to stop a plane that they designed 25 years ago that they say is useless, there's no need for it anymore.
Of course, they're only going to come back now.
No, because it's been made in a lot of states.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Even this year they made a record budget, a military budget, and they raised it afterwards.
So our spending is out of control. That's something President Biden mentioned in the State of the Union.
Spending is out of control.
Spending in many areas is out of control.
No. Well, we could talk about that.
We could talk about that,
But defense spending is definitely out of control. If you remember, you're old enough to remember this, that at the end of the Cold War, I think you're old enough, maybe not. At the end of the Cold War, they said we're going to get a big dividend in reduction of what we have to spend on. And
let me guess, it never happened.
Never happened.
It's only gone up.
It's 25 times as big as what it was at that time. And what was I going to tell you on that score?
There's definitely a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse that goes on in government agencies, and I think that's why government should be trusted with less power, not more, which is directly again what Biden wants. He wants more government power in all his speech.
I want more government too, but I'll tell you why. I don't know if you remember, maybe you're not old enough. One time they were talking about how sad it was that they were buying a toilet for an airplane, for one of the military airplanes, and they were spending like $11,000 for a toilet. So you see how profitable it is, and it's never ending. It's never ending.
Yeah.
So I forgot what was that.
No, so we're talking about in general the military-industrial complex, but I think that what goes on there can be translated to many other industries across America, where the government has an active hand in creating contracts that now they have to bid on. And definitely all those people that win those contracts are either close. There's nepotism and corruption.
I don't know if you listened to the program when I defined all the good things that the government does and all the things that the government does better than the private industry. Were you listening to that one?
I have to go back and listen to that.
No, I'll give you some of the backup because first of all, in general, what you and I are talking about. Even with the Constitution, the Torah, our rabbis over the years modified it and changed it because even the people who prepared the Constitution and the Bill of Rights added a phrase, a very crucial phrase. We have to work to make it a more perfect union, and we should provide, in the future, and forever should provide life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It's evolved to the point where it's you can't change it because they say the Constitution is perfect. They read it as, especially Scalia, who's looked up to as what do they call it?
I highly respect him.
Yeah, I highly hate him because it says you can't change anything. What do they call that?
Originalist.
An originalist. You got to take it. If we took the Torah like that, an eye for an eye, everybody would be blind. Maybe nobody would be in jail. An eye for an eye, but so many things. If you took it literally, if we didn't have adaptive leaders in the Sanhedrin and the rabbis, it would be as it is. They put out stuff in the last week. I don't know if you saw it. How bad the Jews are and they take out excerpts from the Torah that are very,
So
compromising.
we have commentaries to guide up. We have commentaries with Gemara.
I'm saying, and we modify them. We don't. So he was against modifying anything unless he didn't modify it. He reinterpreted it. So he kept it. He was still an originalist, but he reinterpreted it. Anyway, where the hell was I? You bring up a lot of good points, and I like.
Same for you. Same for you. You're pushing back, and I love it.
But let me tell you something. Do you think the president, members of Congress, members of the cabinet, members of the Supreme Court, their children, all their loved ones, are going to get killed by a terrorist or in a war that we fight? Remember this. We're the most involved in wars of any country in the world, and we've never been attacked once on our own territory. Not since the British.
Not since 9/11.
Not since that was a one-day instant. And we went out of that. We should have gone after the guys that did it. We should have gone after Osama bin Laden. Instead, we went to war against Afghanistan after we should have known that Russia was at war with Afghanistan for 15 years and could never get their ass out of there.
We also agree on this issue.
Okay, yeah.
I think we agree on this issue. It was mishandled, and that's again a symptom of government. Anything the government touches, it doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat. They always manage to ruin. So we should take away power from them.
You know what's one of the biggest criticisms the Republicans have against Biden? How he took the troops out of Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
If I was Biden, I would make that one of my prime advantages. So saying for 20 years, almost every president served said we're going to take the troops out. Just like, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but every president in their platform always had that we have to move the Israeli embassy, is it? Mm-hmm. To Jerusalem, the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, every one of them. Why didn't they do it? Every time it came up, they reiterated it, even though while they served. They said, now is not a good time. It was never a good time. Trump did it. It wasn't a good time. Nothing terrible happened, but they're still pushing to move it back to Tel Aviv, they're still pushing. So,
as far as Afghanistan, I think that's another crisis I have here written here.
So why attack Afghanistan and lose so much blood and treasure over 20 years?
I agree.
Over 20 years. Because 3,000 people, and that's terribly sad, 3,000 people. But it was not a war. It was not an attack on this country by a foreign nation. If it was an attack by a foreign nation, that's one thing. It was attacked by, as a matter of fact, the interesting thing is, I think 18 or 17 of the 19 people that blew up the World Trade, the two planes, were Saudis.
There were Egyptians, Saudis in there, yes.
No, 17 out of them were Saudis. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, we're insane, this country. On that day, Bush provides special aircraft to take some of the leaders of the Saudi citizens and Saudi
delegates
provide it back to them. You know, like they were the most important people we have to
I have a big
protect.
problem with that. I'm just going
problem.
to take a second to read from President Biden's State of the Union. He said, "We're the only country that has emerged from every crisis we've ever entered stronger than we got into it." I think based on our discussion, that's proven false.
Which is proven false.
That he says every crisis we've ever entered into, we've come out of it stronger.
Even if it's true, it's what did we lose in the process? What price did we pay in terms of our most important? What's more important asset than your young people? It's ridiculous. And the treasure, the amount of treasure that we lose. In Afghanistan, I think we lost $1 trillion, maybe. I mean, so
much money went to corruption. So much money went to
Right.
government programs like gender education in Kabul that no one needed, and no one respected us for that.
I'll tell you what else I said in my book. It's too bad I didn't publish it. I didn't have time to publish it before the pandemic. I said the great thing about winning the war against the Nazis in Germany and the war in Japan was that we were smart enough to put in our own guy to run the country. MacArthur ran the country for 8 years before they had an election. So we didn't have to beg them as we did in Iraq, would you stop taking the people that do a crime in your country, who are military there for your benefit, and let us put them under trial. They said, fuck you. We're not going to, it's our country. And in Afghanistan, they said the same thing. Because immediately, right after we won the thing, you don't win the war till you get the people at least responsive to the new world. Mm-hmm. And so in those two countries, in Germany also, it was at least 8 years till we had. So in the two countries we won, in Iraq and Afghanistan, we instantly put in their people,
form of government,
which is so ridiculous. You know, you won the war, so take advantage of it. Or we wouldn't take their oil, even though we're spending trillions of dollars. We can't take their oil. Or use the oil that they're drilling.
What do you think about in the state? Just to bring it back to the State of the Union, President Biden says how gas prices are much better than they were before, but at the end of the day, they're still higher than when President Trump was in office.
That's what I take issue with private industry. Do you know what it costs the American oil company to produce oil? I'm sorry, we only got 5 minutes. Cost us about, the American companies cost the Saudis about $11 a barrel. It cost the United States, the major multinationals, maybe $15, $18 a barrel, $20 a barrel. They were charging at the height $120 a barrel. When a year and 4 months ago, I don't know if you're familiar with this, it went to less than zero. They paid you $40 a barrel to take it. Why would they, I couldn't figure out, why would they take it? Why didn't they just shut the wells? Do you know why? Because apparently, I learned from a guy who's in the industry, he says when you shut down a well, sometimes when you reopen it, it produces much less, or you lose all the production. Mm-hmm. So they had every warehouse, every tanker, every place they could store oil in the world, they couldn't put another barrel there. Within 4 months, they started raising the price, and in a year they had it up to 100. A little over a year, they had it up to 120. What was the high? 120, 125. So, and we let them get away with it. It's the biggest rape and the biggest extortion and exploitation in the history of the human race. And we let the cartel, OPEC, do it. And we sit back as somebody getting raped, as if we're enjoying it. And what's wrong with us? Why don't we go after Saudi Arabia, because they're big buyers of our military equipment? That's where they spend all the money. And if they had to go to war with all that equipment, they wouldn't last 2 days. I once had that fight with what's his name, with Brzezinski. Mm-hmm. I had a fight with him, and he came to speak to our group. So he said, we shouldn't go to war to Iraq. It'll be like Vietnam. And I said, are you serious? I said, Israel beat beat the Palestinians, they didn't have an army. Then, when they had an army, the Egyptians attacked them, and 10 countries attacked them, and they won in a week. I said, it won't last a week. And he said, no, it'll be like Vietnam. We can't go into that. So it's bullshit, all these brilliant guys. But let me just finish on this point. I believe that none of the congressmen, senators, their children, as a matter of fact, Bush the father lost a kid, 5 years old, to cancer. I don't know if you know that. 4 years old, something like that. Know. And a lot of them, and even now, the congressmen, they die from these diseases. The defense we should spend this money on is a defense against the things that are going to kill us. We haven't been attacked here in this country, so none of us are going to be killed by terrorists. Maybe another thing will happen like 9/11. But let's spend that money to cure cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, all the things that breaks our hearts every day, that we lose our children from.
Those are all excellent things to
that
spend money on.
That should be the defense budget.
I think it's then indefensible if President Biden is going to.
No, for that we gotta go around with a pishko. We gotta ask charities to give money to cure cancer, to cure heart. It's outrageous, the values we have.
This is what I think some of the issues that could be addressed from this are.
I'm going to bring you back because we didn't finish.
Sure, no problem.
Because it's
my pleasure.
Because it's really important that we cover some of the other stuff.
Yes.
What was I going to tell you?
I would love to also talk about things like immigration, to things as well as healthcare. He mentioned a lot of pharmaceuticals. Crime is always another issue.
You are great, because those are all the issues that I want to talk about. That was the genius of Trump. The genius of Trump. I thought he used to be one of my best friends. Where he used to introduce me, he said, Morty Davis, the greatest guy in the world, the biggest guy on Wall Street. He always has, what do you call it when you have exaggeration?
Hyperbole.
Hyperbole, yeah. Morty Davis is I wasn't anything of what he said, but, I enjoyed, and it was flattering to be introduced that way. You know why he did it? I was on a board of trustees for something that Eisenhower started. What was the name of it?
Freedom Foundation.
The Freedom Foundation. What was the...
Valley Forge.
For Valley Forge. He set up in memory of Valley Forge, which is right outside of Philadelphia, this institution. What's the name of it again? See, at my age.
Freedom Foundation.
I would love to have you as president and kick Biden out, because you're really sharp as a tack.
The Freedom Foundation. So I was on the board of trustees. So they called me up and they asked me, we're honoring Donald Trump. Would you come down to Philadelphia and introduce him? So I agreed to go down. I introduced him. I said great things. I said, the greatest guy. We had trouble in Central Park finishing the ice skating rink. 20 different builders came year after year after year. He came in no time at all. He finished it. Everybody's enjoying it today. He's building special stuff in the States and all over the world. And it was very, very flattering. He came up and kissed me on the lips afterwards. You know why? He wasn't married at the time, and he had like a supermodel there. And after the talk, she came up and thanked me. And she couldn't wait to get him back in the hotel room.
To be clear, I'm not 100% pro-Trump, 100% against. I liked him. I thought he did a great job, and I think there's a lot of positives from him that President Biden would be wise to imitate and copy.
That's what I want to hear next time.
And we can talk about that. I think he did an excellent job doing what he did.
Yeah, but what was it? So I said what a genius he was.
Yeah,
because he picked out issues that not the major issues of the country.
I disagree. I think there were some major issues.
No, let me say why. To me, that if they did defense spending for the kind of I'm talking about, that would be. Do you know this country? They do an evaluation every year. What organization does it? I forget. Anyway, it's an international organization that judges the happiness of every country, and where our country has instructions to provide life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You know what it's turned into?
We're not doing too well.
You know what it's turned into, sadly? Life, liberty, and the maximization of GDP and profits, especially profits, regardless of what it takes. So the oil companies, they don't care because they're gouging the public. If it's a competitive free market, why aren't they charging less? The minute the Saudi and cartel announced, right up there. It's outrageous. It's outrageous that we stood back and had the biggest external tax in the history of the human race ever since 1972. I'll tell you more about it. How we owned the oil. We owned all the oil in those countries, and we let it go without the major oil companies making a whimper. I don't know if the history books anymore at your age, but at my age, we had history books that said that if Ecuador, United Fruit was the biggest fruit and vegetable and provider of important products that we live by, the most important company in the United States. As a matter of fact, a guy who used to be a rabbi became a partner in Lehman Brothers and then became a major, at the head of United Fruit, the major shareholder. And ultimately, he jumped out of the 42nd Street floor with his attaché case. His son is now a multi-billionaire. He's head of Apollo. Is the son Eugene Black or the father was Eugene Black? Leon Black. The father was Leon. The father was Leon. I think the son. So anyway, when the Ecuadorians, some group in Ecuador, or what do they call it, the militia or something, came and captured a banana farm in Ecuador, we sent down a battleship. They called it in the history books gunboat diplomacy. We sent a battleship. The minute we sent a battleship, they left. In 71, 72, Saudi Arabia, all those countries were, I think, colonies of England. And then England didn't see there wasn't oil as an issue in those days. Then, otherwise, they would have never, they were more of a burden than an asset. So they gave them to all the guys that were wearing schmatters. What do they call them? The guys that wander around what's the term they use for the guys that
nomads? No.
Yeah, nomads, maybe nomads.
They gave it to the sheikhs, the tribal leaders.
They weren't sheikhs. They were guys in nomads in the desert. They were moving from place to place. They had camels.
Tribes,
They made them kings. The head of Kuwait is a king. The head of Saudi Arabia is a king. The head of Qatar is they're all kings. But being kings, they had no technology knowledge. They had no way. They didn't even know how to get the oil out, because you have to have some
technology,
knowledge.
Sure.
So the American companies and the big British company, I guess British Petroleum and all of those came and said, if you let us have the access or ownership we'll do it all for you, and we'll give you a percentage of a good percentage of whatever we derive from every barrel of oil. In 71, it was $1 a barrel. When I was a kid, my father paid 6 cents a gallon for oil, right? He also paid only $400 for a new car. And Ford was making cars, only black cars. And he said, then he announced, you could have any color you want, because people were complaining. He said, you could have any color you want as long as it's black.
Now we have so many choices, it's
right.
changed.
Now we have too many choices. You got to be a genius.
Yeah, it takes you a full day to decide what color you want.
Full day. That's for you. You're a genius. But it takes me a year and a half to figure out with all the choices,
model, trim, this,
and the amenities I want to ask, and now it's 100 times worse. Tesla,
Electrical vehicles, yeah,
e-vehicle,
e-vehicles, yeah. We can talk. We could. I'd love to talk about that too.
Yeah.
That was something that they brought up on
Yeah.
the State of the Union.
No, so we should talk about oil too, because
Energy, oil, sure.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So what was I just telling you?
That technology was needed
Oh
to
no,
bring the
so
oil
it's
out.
$1 a barrel,
Yeah.
$1 a barrel. All of a sudden, they saw this coming out, and $1 a barrel, they were getting maybe 40 cents, and the American companies that owned it was getting 60 cents, and they were happy getting it. All of a sudden, Occidental Petroleum under Libya, was in Libya, Gaddafi, took over, they said, we're going to take over the oil. They confiscated the oil, they were the owners. The next week it went up to $2, $3. Within maybe 6 months, it went up, or a year, it went up to $8 a barrel, from $1. Instead of the oil companies screaming and yelling right away, like to get gunboat diplomacy, look, they're taking away our ownership, we created the value, they said, who the hell cares if, let them own it. At $8 a barrel, we get more at marketing it than we ever got for the whole part that we kept. So they conspired, and when the cartel started, they were only too happy. And ever since, they've been part of the cartel, even though they're not members. Whenever they raise it, they don't say it's wrong, or we're gonna keep the price at what we have. To me, and it would be easy to respond because we sanction Russia, we sanction Iran. We could sanction the Saudis. Got nothing to do with the money, all the money they get. So they buy every new equipment. We vote for their newest equipment. Israel objects.
The relationship is very lopsided. We always end up on the wrong side of the bargain. This is something that.
But I'm saying here's somebody that's raping us announces it. We want to limit the supply, and we limit and get the price to this price. They announce it. They don't keep it a secret.
What do you think about energy inside the United States?
Why don't we sanction them and say to them, we and our allies will not sell you wheat or any of the
armaments? Yeah.
No,
right.
More essential than armaments, because you could live without armaments. Although I don't know if they could. That's their major toy. But food products, what they call in economics,
different commodities.
Inelastic, things that are inelastic demand. Like gas has inelastic demand. Even when it goes up, people have to buy it. So they have us by the proverbials. Mm-hmm. It's like salt. Salt is inelastic demand. If you lower the price, people aren't going to buy a lot more, and if you raise the price, they're not going to buy a lot less. So those are inelastic. Other things you don't have to buy. You go to Walmart and you want toys, you don't have to. You could tell your kids you can't have that. You could live without it. So when there's inelastic demand, so the things that they must have, like wheat and what else do you have to have?
What do you think about energy then in the United States? If we keep our energy domestic, if we drill for oil here in the United States? That's a whole
different subject. I believe we should, long ago, have had we had one with Sputnik, who was shut up. Kennedy was only a president for not even a full term. And he's looked up to for one reason. Because during his tenure, he came up with things that mattered, that have remained, and that are still quoted. Because he came up with a saying, ask not what your country could do for you, ask what you could do for your country, which is tremendous. When people are asked to put on masks, no, we don't want to put on masks. What do you mean? Do it if the country asks you to do it,
but
even if it's wrong.
They could make you do anything. Then
even the
country can make you do anything they want. That's not right either.
No, but if they push you to do the wrong thing, they would rebel. They would vote you out. They would. What do you mean? The politicians
sometimes people get conditioned to accept something that's wrong.
Well, okay.
We see that in history.
Okay. That's in a row. But what else did he do? He compulsively, the minute the Russians shot up Sputnik, he compulsively had a crusade, unlimited. Money was no object. And he funded every university. To this day, they're major beneficiaries because they set up science departments. He funded MIT and Harvard and Stanford and small colleges and businesses that did research. And we beat the Russians used to laugh. We said, we'll beat them to the moon. And they were sending up significant satellites. And they said, yeah, you'll beat us to the moon, because we were sending them nothing, our first attempts. They said, yeah, you'll send a man to the moon as soon as you learn how to reduce the size of a man to an orange. They laughed at us. You'll never catch up to us, but we did.
So you'd like to see the same being done in
oil and energy? I wanted to see the same crusade, unlimited. Because forget about whether they make a lot of money, they're gouging us. It's a terrible thing. It causes diseases. It causes asthma. It's a poison.
I would only say that
fossil fuel.
Sure.
So why not get rid of it? And we could. Mm-hmm. But the big auto companies always objected. You can't raise the fuel mileage. What do they call that?
The EPA. There's like a rating for
it.
Coffee.
What?
Coffee.
Coffee. Is that what you drink in the morning? What does it stand for?
Fuel. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some fuel efficiency. Yeah.
And they, over the years, reluctantly, they've increased it from like maybe 12 miles a gallon to maybe 50 miles a gallon today. So
I think we both like capitalism. If there's a company that can make a better car that has better mileage, let people buy it. I don't think it's fair to...
But if there's a monopoly against it and private industry is against it, look, the gun lobby is so powerful.
They're not powerful, by the way. They're outspent maybe 10 to 1 by the anti-gun lobby.
They're the only ones. It doesn't matter. For them, it's the single issue.
No, there's a lot of other organizations that are anti-gun.
I once preached to Hillary Clinton. I wanted to see her win. At that time, I was a Clinton fan. I'm what do you call it? Mixed up.
You're independent.
No,
I like your independent thinking.
What do you call it? It starts with an E.
Egalitarian? No,
not egalitarian. I do both sides depending on which. If I backed Clinton because I liked him. Mm-hmm. I wanted Hillary years ago. I told her when she was running for Senate, if she was going to run for president, there was a guy years ago, Kiefer, headed a committee on crime, on the mafia and so forth. He was so successful at that committee that on that one issue he became a major. He almost won the nomination, the Democratic nomination for president. I said every candidate has the same laundry list, the same exact laundry list. Their platform is exactly the same.
Sure.
So I said it's hard to differentiate. The only way you could differentiate, pick one issue. In my case, I told her pick oil. Mm-hmm. And do this crusade. Mm-hmm. But pick whatever issue, and either win or lose with that issue. I once, one of the best lessons I had, and I'm not telling you this story to flatter myself, I told it to Len. I took a course at Harvard Business School in the second year, which is when you take optional courses, with a guy who was the toughest grader in the school, Professor Bright, an interesting name. And a group of us, we had a study group, 5 of us had to do a presentation, oral presentation. So we got up there and we did an oral. 2 of them one was from Australia, one was from England. I would give them a distinction just for their speech, and meanwhile, with my Maki accent from Brooklyn and a southerner, all very impressive speakers. And me, I'm the worst speaker of the group. At the end of the presentation, he gave us our grades. He told us our grades verbally, orally, and he said, Davidowitz gets a distinction, and the rest of you get a high pass. So they immediately said, we don't begrudge, wait a second, we don't begrudge the Vidowitz distinction, but we all worked on it together, we all did it together. Why did we only get a high pass? So he responded. He said, it's common knowledge throughout the school that I'm the worst grader. I rarely give a high pass. You guys did sensationally. So that high pass reflects how sensationally you did in my course. And said the Vidowitz did one thing that when you get out into the business world, into the real world, you don't get that much time, you don't get that much span of attention. He picked one issue and he drove it home. Anyway, you were great, and you're great to tolerate me.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here with you, and I would love to talk about many other issues.
Let me give you a present. Have you got a copy of my book or not?
No.
On happiness.
I'd love it. Or My Misery Back.
Oh, yeah, you know about it?
I've heard the title. It's excellent.
Let's see if I want it.
Genius title.
Handy, some.